Okay, well, welcome back. I hope you've all had a good morning and you've all enjoyed your lunch. I am delighted that the theme of malapropisms is continuing in this conference. We had this morning me being referred to as Laurie, Sandy Nairn being referred to as Nick Sirota, and I also noticed as I popped into the session this afternoon that Alex Farquharson was referred to as Alex Ferguson in his session. So it's going very well. This is a new kind of theme. We may be focusing on it next year. I'm particularly looking forward this afternoon to the comments from Gloria Del Monte and Brendan Foster. Anyway, it's just my job to hand over to your brilliant chair for our cultural question time, Anne McElvoy. Her CV is intimidatingly brilliant. She's now public policy editor at The Economist, and of course, as we all know, us culture vultures, she presents the Radio 3 Arts and Ideas programme Nightwaves. Anne.
I'm not Anne Robinson. Welcome back from our very splendid lunch, everyone, and looking forward to cultural question time. I'm going to get the really exciting bits out of the way first, but it's nonetheless important. Please all switch off your mobile phones and not just to silent for all the usual reasons involving technology. But also just to tell you roughly about how I'd like it to work, I've got a lot of questions sent in before the event and a very quick roundup about what you've all been responding to this morning, and I'd very much like to factor that in and get the panel to respond to that. So we're going to do that first, and then as soon as that is done, we will of course leave adequate time for you to come with your questions, which we'll take in groups of 3, I think. If we could make sure that microphones go around pretty quickly, then we can move smoothly from one to the other. Do wait for microphones, if you would, because we're audio and video recording this session, so it makes a big difference. And please fill in your evaluation form in the delegate pack. I don't know what happens if you don't, but apparently it's really disastrous. And I think, more to the point, the feedback is hugely appreciated by the organisers, so if you could put that on your to-do list. However, the panel being the main thing, let me introduce, and starting, going obviously away from me, my right, your left, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, who is a columnist for The Independent and broadcaster and has stirred up many debates in her time. Next to Yasmin is Gloria de Piero, the Shadow Minister for Culture. So, of course, she'll be writing the budget this afternoon, just quite casually. Next to Gloria is Don Foster, who's co-chair of the Parliamentary Policy Committee on Culture, Olympics, Media and Sport. He's a Liberal Democrat. And next to Don, we have Josie Rourke, director of the Bush Theatre. And on the other end is Alan Davey, chief executive of Arts Council England. Your panel, everybody. I think we've probably all got to different places, having heard some of this morning's discussion and come with the ideas and questions we wanted to put. I read the provocation that was sent out by the RSA, and I thought it was quite aptly named. It was somewhere between an underwear advert and a counter-revolutionary slogan. But it certainly did put a lot of the very provocative questions at the heart of the arts debate. Should publicly funded arts have to account for themselves in an instrumental way in order to have a claim on the public purse? We know that that was a view widely taken under New Labour. Does it persist today, or are we looking for something else? If, as the provocation argued, we need a different kind of instrumentalism, what should that be and who would account for it? And I think that led very readily into some of the things that you discussed this morning and some of the submissions that you heard. If the new slogan is excellence in the provision of arts, who defines what that excellence is, and what kind of rating system do we give to different kinds of artistic endeavour, and, of course, crucially, their funding. Insolvency, I think one of the submissions said, is a trending topic, and how balefully true that is, but that's the world in which we live. I'm just going to go straight to the panel now, but 3 key questions, panel, that did come out, I think, of this morning's discussions. Jeremy Hunt promised in 2010 a golden age for the arts under the Conservatives. What, in your view, would constitute a golden age? If you could just keep that question in your mind, as I know you're great Renaissance men and women. Another couple of things that came very strongly out of this morning. What do you think about the allocation of DCMS funding across the country? The London-centric focus often remarked upon. Does it need to change if we're serious about the slogan, great art for everyone? or is London rightfully king? And how can Government and Arts Council England support new collaborations and broker collaborations between the commercial and subsidised sectors? What would be possible new approaches to that? So, Yasmin, would you like to kick us off?
I don't have to do all three, do I?
You can choose, but it would be very nice if you could at least reflect some of the debate in your answers.
I think talking about golden ages is even more meaningless today than it would have been a year ago. So I'd rather not talk about it. It's just political talk. But I do think that I've been thinking about this over the last couple of days about value. And both the second and the third question, I suppose, essentially depend on whether people in this country think the arts and culture are as valuable as arts practitioners like to think they are, of course, and also whether in this age of austerity, it's not just the instrumentalism of a different kind, but I think I would suggest that the language has to change. Some of the self-importance has to go. I am always amazed at how inflated the arts and cultures are about their role. I completely believe in this. I think it's the soul of a nation. But I think when people say the kinds of things they say about the arts, in a situation where there is going to be extraordinary poverty, extraordinary anxiety about the next day, I think the language has to change, and perhaps the ambitions too. You have to speak to people. You know, when you say, we want to save this painting for the nation, and it's going to cost £3 million, I completely understand that. But, you know, my life isn't as on the line as that of many other people. So I think the instrumentalism has got to include greater understanding of the society in which the arts serves and must speak.
Gloria.
Piero. Well, I suppose what I would kind of classify as a golden age for the arts is the day that I didn't read an opinion poll, which actually I read yesterday in a pamphlet by an organisation called New Deal of the Mind, where they said they surveyed 2,000 people and asked, what do you think of the arts cuts? And I think it was 2/3 said that they agreed with them. 1/5 said that there should be no public funding for the arts at all. A golden age for me would be if those figures were reversed. And I think that part of the reason why that kind of poll may have come up with those findings is because of the definition of the arts and how arts have become synonymous, or that word arts have become synonymous in many people's minds with the Royal Opera House or the National Ballet, things which actually the majority of people don't get access to. So for me, I agree with you, Yasmin. We need to change the language, because I will tell you about something in my constituency. I represent Ashfield, which is a collection of 3 former mining towns. In one of them, called Eastwood, D.H. Lawrence was born, and there is a museum there, 2 actually, and the council want to close it down because it doesn't make enough money, and kind of the anger, that kind of, the fact that mining town has that D.H. Lawrence heritage there, it gives them people, it gives us all, it's where I live, civic pride. It brings in tourism, it makes us proud, and where there's so much kind of sadness about kind of that Eastwood or Ashfield's best days are behind them, it gives us something to be proud of today. Having said that, there is not a great deal of money from the Arts Council that has come into Ashfield, so I do think that the cuts to local government are as important as the cuts to local government. I would say...
Can I just ask if you see any other room for collaborations there, which was sort of the third question we touched on, which wouldn't involve simply sort of complaining that money hasn't come to you from a central pot?
Well, I read something actually. I was listening to I was reading a summary of the comments that were made this morning, and I thought where you guys must have answered how arts organisations need to change. And I think the most powerful kind of two words, which I found in these, were listen and hear. And that means us going out, talking to people, finding out what arts means to them, because what it means in Ashfield may be very different for what it means in London.
Fair enough. Don Foster.
Can I answer it rather differently? The golden age for the arts will come when political parties do not do what they all do, my own included, is employ opinion pollsters to go out and ask people questions on which they then base their party's policies. And the questions that they ask are usually framed in, what are you worried about? As a result of that, people answer in terms of education, terrorism, immigration, crime, disorder, whatever it might be. Very rarely does a political party employ an opinion poll firm to go out and say to people what matters to them, what are they interested in, what do they enjoy. And I think the golden age would come when political parties actually start to address those questions and start to develop policies in those areas. And I think the real golden age would come when each and every one of us in this country believes that absolutely critical to the future of this country is the genuine development of creativity in each and every one of us. That means looking much more carefully at what we're doing in our schools. It worries me enormously. I'm not here to defend the government, even though I'm one of the parties that's in government, but it enormously worried me that we have made such cuts to things like the Creative Partnership Scheme that I think could do so much in our schools. So I think it is about starting to address the right sort of questions that is so important. Of course, it's going to be difficult in the current financial climate, and no doubt we'll come on to that. And I entirely agree with Gloria when she says that the real danger is not the cuts in terms of the Arts Council funding, but it's actually in terms of what happens at local government. And what we've seen in some councils, and I'm not making a party political point at all, is that we have actually seen that they don't yet get, whether it's the intrinsic or the instrumental value of the arts, in terms of some of the budget decisions that they're making. And so collectively, those of us that care about these things, care about the importance of creativity, recognise the link between creativity and the creative industries, which can actually help to drive our economy forward and get us out of the mess that we're in. When all of those become much higher on the agenda, with your help and with help like Gloria, myself and others who care about the matters, then we could move to the golden age.
Josie Rourke from the Bush Theatre.
I wanted to reflect on the character of the artist, as I understand it from the panel's comments and some of the discussion that I've caught today. And I just wanted to counter, really, Yasmin's point that there is a self-importance around artists. The artists that I know, and it's partly to do with the kind of theatre that I work in, are swift, ready, responsive, ever-changing and deeply pragmatic people who know more than anyone else how to deal with a cut or a sudden influx of cash. They're not opportunistic, but they are enormously and acutely able to reflect the world in which they live and the conditions under which they work by responding to it as artists. In terms of the golden age for the arts point, actually I've just come to my 10-year anniversary of working in the arts, starting out as a theatre director. That's still my trade, but as my job being an artistic director. And I think the most important thing I would say, and this is a point that I think doesn't just belong to the arts sector and arts funding, but I know stretches across questions, particularly around education at the moment. There's no way that I'd have been a theatre director or become an artistic director if I hadn't been able largely to work within the subsidised sector that instinctively championed and nurtured me from 10 years ago to this day. And there is a real point here about what happens when we start to reduce the opportunity for, and I can speak specifically about theatre, to do what theatre does, which is instinctively generous, interested in new talent, wanting to bring people on, wanting to provide platforms in a way that I haven't experienced. I've recently worked in America quite a lot, and it's a completely different culture, And so there's a question about what kind of account we'll be able to give as artists, how we'll be able to take that pragmatism, survive, reflect, celebrate, if the opportunities become limited to those people who can get jobs by not being paid for jobs.
Just very quickly, Josie, I mean, do you see any, I mean, that's a cri de coeur, obviously, and a lot of people seem to share it, but do you see any way for government or indeed Arts Council England to broker collaboration between the subsidised and the commercial sectors that would at least heal some of your pain?
Well, I think that we need to just take stock of what we already do. So I'm about to go and do an enormous commercial show in the West End. It'll be the first time I've worked directly into there. But the reason I got that job is because I've done 10 years of steady work as a practitioner that's built a kind of trust that goes, please come across into the commercial sector. Our Bush Theatre playwrights, the minute they have a play on at the Bush, if not before, are instantly snapped up by film and telly. We're actually unbelievably porous. I would say that's another kind of distinctive feature of us as a culture, that we really know how to spot talent and bring it on. It goes back to the very beginning in terms of where we can identify people and what type of people get identified.
Fine, thank you. And Alan Davey, Chief Executive of Arts Council England.
I mean, just following up on that last point, I mean, I think there's a long track record of the subsidised sector morphing into the commercial sector, and if you look at lots of things that go on in the West End, at any one time, there are links either through the actors or the technicians or the artists involved with the subsidised sector. So I think getting a better sense of the subsidised sector as a place where people can learn and grow, and this kind of R&D relationship to the wider creative industries, getting a better articulation of that would be really good, and that's something I hope we can do in the next few years, along with everything else. And everything else, including survival, expansion, and keeping our horizons sort of lifted. In terms of a golden age, you'd expect me to say, I want to be assured of enough resources for the arts to be able to flourish and to give the arts the space and encouragement to flourish. I mean, that's really important. It's important that politicians give us that right kind of encouragement, which isn't a kind of bashing us over the head because we're complaining because we haven't got enough money or whatever, but it's giving us courage somehow. And I know it's quite a strangely difficult thing, compared to sports, say, for politicians to stand up on a national stage at least and talk passionately about the arts. It's perhaps easier locally, where you might have, say, a local museum, a local theatre, which is really, in the best sense, is really attached to its community and really seen by its community as a valuable resource. And the point that you made, Don, about opinion polls is a really important one, because just saying to people, what do you think about funding the arts? People don't necessarily know what that means. Yeah. The arts, as you said, probably means the Opera House. And we did a piece of public value work, extended work with people in various communities up and down the country a couple of years ago. And people began with that prejudice. And then we took them through what was in their own locality, and, that's the arts. That's what we're talking about. That's the kind of thing you pay for with we pay for with the lottery. We have to get better at communicating what we are and being proud and strong in what we are. And if I could say to politicians, the best thing you can help give us is that encouragement and courage.
Well, that's a very good point, I think, which we should begin to go to the floor. So what I'd like to do is, as I said, take questions in groups of about 3. If you would just raise your hand so that we can get microphones to you, and then we can get going. There's so many of you can't all be shy. I'm going to this lady down here. First of all, can I just get another couple of questions ready? Is there anyone on this side of the room who feels emboldened, furious, or in other way keen to contribute? Yes, I'll take another question down from this side. It's a bit like the pantomime, but this side of the room's really not doing so well. So could you please, oh, yes, you can. Either that or I can't see. Well, I'll take all from the front at the moment, but I would love to bring you in from further back. There's a gentleman here with a blue shirt. I'm sorry. No, that's fine. No, I mean, for now, if you're happy to ask a question. You? The mic will come to you in good time. So this lady here, I think, was going to start.
Thank you. I'm Marion McNear. I'm a local councillor and I'm on the board of the South West Arts Council. It doesn't feel as though the microphone's on, is it?
Yeah, you're doing very well. Just keep on going.
All right. I understand that about 95% of children participate actively in some form of the arts in schools, but then when they leave, there's a big fall-off of interest. How can we, as arts practitioners, improve the involvement of young people after they leave school in the arts?
Thank you. Let's take the second, keep that one firmly in mind, and take the second question from the lady down here in the green top. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rosie Greenlees. I'm Director of the Crafts Council. I was absolutely delighted this morning to hear that there's going to be a further Henley review of cultural education, because whilst I absolutely support the review's recommendations around music, it's incredibly important that children have the opportunity to have a broader cultural education, including the access to making skills. If you were being asked as a member of the panel to recommend to Darren Henley what should be in this second review, I'd be very interested to know what you think those recommendations should be.
Very good, thank you. And the gentleman down here as well, thank you.
John Hope Hawkins, the SAA, Society of All Artists. I've raised several questions during the course of the day. There's one actually concerns politicians, really. I do quite a lot of work in care homes, hospices, daycare centres and so on, with taking painting in. Could we please, we talk about reducing red tape. We need to sort out CRB check. We need to reduce the amount of what you can't do about taking photographs of children in schools. There's a whole lot of, I think, interpretation that needs sorting out here, possibly rather than the law, of what you can and can't do with health and safety and political correctness and so on and so forth. There's a whole range of issues there that would probably make it a lot simpler for a lot of people working in our sector.
Thank you. Now, Gloria has to leave us at 2:45 to go to her constituency, and I'm keen to everyone that gets a good chat. So I'm going to start with Gloria to Piero on this. 3 questions. One was participation and how we move from school to the rest of life, the review that the lady mentioned, an education review, and the gentleman's last question, CRB checks, and does the big state get in the way of local and community engagement in the arts? Gloria?
Yeah, from school, how do you go on to kind of express yourself? And I think libraries are really important here, and what is happening to libraries, I think 50% of councils are looking at reducing library provision. And, you know, libraries, they were actually enshrined in law by Alec Douglas Hume, when the Conservatives, you might argue, were proper One Nation Tories. And, you know, one kind of physical example from my own constituency, again, is how important libraries are and how they've enabled somebody who was young, who used their library to go on and express themselves and find a successful career, is Chris Gascoigne, who, does anyone watch Coronation Street? Or is it just me? Any Corrie views? Right, OK. So Chris Gascoigne, who plays Peter Barlow in Coronation Street, is from my constituency. He grew up in Sutton-in-Ashfield, and I said to him, how did you go from Sutton-in-Ashfield, where we have issues with aspiration, to being this great actor on the street? And he said, you know what, I had a great drama teacher, but I fell in love with my local library, and I went there, and I read, and I immersed myself in books, and then that enabled me to go on and become a successful actor. And I think where I would go next is to talk about the creative industries, because, you know, this is a potential for great optimism here. The revolution that we are seeing in work, where I used to work in television, it's a fantastic job. Imagine expressing yourself when you go to work. You know, if my party fought in the last century for people to have the right to a job and then maybe not kind of harm themselves or damage themselves, or the right to work in decent conditions, then perhaps the fight of the next century is to have good jobs. And if my brother-in-law is a plasterer, if I said to him, would you rather work in the music industry? My goodness, yes, he would. And I think that's a challenge for politicians to kind of ensure that those jobs in the creative industries are not just in Soho, but that people all over Britain have access to those fantastic jobs. I think that's the real challenge for us from school to later life, because, you know, being able to express yourself in your job, what a great kind of a noble goal for politics and for us all to have. In terms of CRB checks, I hear what you say, and I guess it's one of those where you got to kind of, get that balance right to enable you to kind of do wonderful, your wonderful jobs, and to enable, kind of safety to be paramount. I know that's a really boring answer, but I guess it's the right one in my view.
Let's go to Alan next on this. Alan.
Yes, keeping young people sort of interested in the arts when they leave school. And I think part of the answer there is actually to get the quality of what experience they have in the arts in school kind of better. And this is something we've been working at over the years. I'm not sure if we've got it universally right yet. But, if people have an off-putting exposure to the arts in school, then that will sort of put them off further on. So what I'm saying is if we can get it right in schools, then people will be interested, but we've got to give people the opportunities to follow that interest when they leave school. And that's partly about arts organisations knowing their audience better. We did some work on the free theatre scheme, where it became clear that some places really didn't know their young audience at all, and they really didn't know how to tell people what was going on, how to attract people to what was going on, how to maintain and deepen their interest. And I think there's all kinds of opportunities that we could follow there, including using technology and the internet and new ways of contacting people as we learn more. So more of our money is used towards attracting young people and giving them the ability to explore the art that's on offer and to deepen their understanding of it and deepen their experience of it and go on that journey, which many of us have gone through. And I hope we can get music education right in schools. I remember my music education stopped at the age of 11, and I've been kind of suffering from that ever since. And through all the art forms, we need to sort of get right a kind of sense of a pathway from initial exposure to deepening knowledge, to becoming an engaged member of the audience, to becoming the talent of tomorrow. And I think that isn't there yet. But I think hopefully the opportunity of the Henley Review might give us that opportunity to see that through and make some more sense of it.
Did you want to offer a comment on CRB checkpoint? Or?
Not really.
Not really. Good. Well, in that case, we shall move to Yasmin.
It's a very good question, but I don't know the reasons why there should be this fall-off. And I think the reasons for it are probably very complicated because the culture inhabited by our young people, I'm the mother of a teenage daughter, is so different from anything I've ever known. And we have to respect that and find ways to use that world to inject a new love or a new relationship with the arts. And, all this stuff about having great paintings, for example, available on phones and so on is a good way. But in the end, I still think an inspirational person can change that. All my daughter's friends, I forced my children to go to, because I love the theatre. I completely love the theatre. I loved Shakespeare from the age of 8. So I took them all. I punished both. I punished them. I took them from the age of 4. They never, ever fell in love the way I did. But an inspirational drama teacher in my daughter's school last year, an extraordinary woman, put on a school show and got them all involved. And for the first time in years, these girls, weren't, watching Friends every evening or gossiping or destroying each other with, the way they do using their phones. They were at school working on the show till 10 o'clock at night. And it gave them a love of the theatre that I never could. So I still think it's possible. But there's so many competing demands. And the one thing I do blame this government for in terms of the arts, because I don't think they've done too many things in the arts that I can find fault with yet. But the one thing is with university education, the emphasis on the sciences, saying science and maths and engineering are intrinsically more important to our society, will filter down, I think, into schools and into young children, that the arts are second class. So and I don't think we should allow that, actually. Because we also need people to love the arts, not just to make the arts. And we're taking away that.
I'm conscious that we need, I'd like another round of questions before
yes,
Gloria leaves.
I don't have very much
on this round, and then we'll.
And I agree totally with the lady from the Crafts Council. I so agree with you that sector needs respect and resources.
Don Foster.
Very interestingly, I think all three questions are absolutely intrinsically interrelated. How do we do something about the fall-off of involvement of young people in the arts? What should be Darren Henley's outcomes? And what do we do about CRB checks? The truth is that if we look at the fall-off that takes place, it is very worrying indeed. What should we do about it? First of all, we should slim down the national curriculum, make more time available in our schools so that teachers can use their creativity to inspire the creativity in the young people in the schools. Secondly, we should recognise the real value, as Yasmin said, of the inspirational people who come into schools if they can get round the CRB checks, who can make a real difference to what happens. That's why I'm so disappointed about what's happened about the cultural partnership programme. I've seen some wonderful examples of that working. A group of young people in Cornwall who set off under inspired leadership by somebody who came in to start promoting their own school play locally to increase their audience, went on and took responsibility for developing all sorts of ways of promoting all sorts of artistic endeavour in Cornwall. Actually turned it into a small business in the end. But the key thing for me is to do what we've tried to do, and I'll give credit where it's due, started by the Labour Party when they were in government, in relation to the drop-off in sports participation. And what they recognised was that if you don't, at an early stage, link what happens in school to what happens outside school, then people can't establish relationships that can continue when they leave school. And so that's why there is a link between sports clubs and individual schools. So anybody interested in rugby or football or hockey or whatever it is can start getting involved with their local football, rugby, hockey clubs in the local area. And
but Don, how do you want to do that? Because one question, can I just say a question that was actually left, I think, from this morning, was that sports place in the curriculum is secure, the place of the arts is not. Yeah. Come on, you're there in this government. What do you do about it?
And Alan made that very point just a few minutes ago, that somehow it's easier to talk about sports and those sorts of links than it is about art. But the actual principles of how you do it are exactly the same. If you give the teachers in the schools more time and freedom to start developing those links with artistic organisations in their local community, there will be mutual benefit both to the school, to the pupil and to those organisations. And I hope that Darren Henley will look at the ways of doing that. I hope, incidentally, we can also use the Cultural Olympiad as a way of inspiring young people. I think the real opportunities there in my own constituency, the Olympic Art Project, got children working on artistic works inspired by 2012. So good was it, it ended up being taken over to Beijing for the Beijing Olympics. And that's what I hope Darren Henley is going to be looking at. And in terms of the CRB checks, it is complete nonsense that, for example, if you want to work in one school in one local authority area, you have to have a CRB check. You then go to another school in another local authority area. You have to have the whole exercise repeated. And we abandoned the central register. That was complete nonsense. We ought to be slimming down the bureaucracy around it, having a central register so you don't have to keep repeating, doing all of these sorts of things. And thank goodness, sir, you mentioned care homes and the huge obvious benefit of getting artistic endeavour into care homes. And I just give you one example. I'm sorry to use ones I care passionately about in my own constituency. The Golden Oldies, getting older people singing, has brought a huge, tremendous benefit to those old people. But we then took it further. And we actually then got young people from schools coming in to see what these golden oldies were doing. And if you see a session of these old people in the care homes singing with the young people there, within seconds the kids themselves are getting up and singing along. And we've broken down all sorts of barriers and we've answered the first question.
Thank you very much. Josie, your last... Sorry, do applaud. Josie, your last. I'm just conscious of getting a bit more time for questions.
We're moving the Bush Theatres home this year, and about 3 weeks ago, Alan Ayckbourn came to visit because we're putting a theatre into a found space. And amongst the many brilliant things he said and advice that he had was that the reason that he loved opening theatres and the theatre so much is that anybody who turns up at the door will have something useful to offer. Be it being able to hang a light or edit a play or look after an acting company or act. And that really connects me back to something that's terribly important to remember is that certainly theatre in this country is a craft-based, is a skills-based medium. And that I think there's something tremendously important in understanding how there is always a job for someone to do within that. And actually it's a wonderful tool with which to engage with young people on a number of levels. I think in terms of reaching audiences, that it's a gift. It is a gift to be able to market a show to an audience. It's a gift to be able to get people to turn up. It's really important that we track all these unbelievable innovations that allow us to get in touch with people across digital platforms now. Some people can do that, some people can't. Some people have an instinct for it. They tend to be younger people, and you need to go and find them and get them to help you market your work. But I think we also need to recognise that there is, certainly in the age in which we live, an unbelievable gift in being able to articulate an organisation, an arts organisation, as a personality that talks about itself and not just abusing Twitter to market shows, which we sometimes do, because young people certainly can recognise when they're having something marketed to them and when they're being asked to engage with an organisation.
Great, let's grab a couple of questions before Gloria has to head off. I think I'll take one from the lady here in the very nice invisible gold necklace, and something I love from the sort of Siberian wasteland at the back. Yes, well, I've got two hands up. Yes. The very gymnastic lady waving at me at the back. Let's start down here.
Hello, I'm Pat Cochrane from Cape UK. We work with children and young people and run the Creative Partnerships programme in Yorkshire. So it's absolutely fantastic to hear that Don has such an in-depth understanding of the potential of the programme and the amazing work that it's done. And many other organisations have worked in schools in very powerful ways as well. I'm just slightly worried that the emphasis on the Henley Review is ignoring the fact that at the same time there's a major curriculum review going on. And the reason why 95% of children actually have arts and cultural experience in schools is because it's part of the national curriculum. We're being asked now, do we want those subjects to remain part of the national curriculum? And some schools undoubtedly will keep it there, but we are already seeing schools not reappointing art and design teachers, not reappointing music teachers, because it's not part of the English baccalaureate.
I think we've got, it's just that Gloria does have to go, and I would like to hear her answer on that.
My question is
swiftly
really,
to your question.
How can we make joined-up thinking?
Thank you. I think we did get the sense of your question. Thank you. The lady at the back who had given you a good wave.
Bobby Baker, artist, the dramatic one. And I'd said this before in the panel, but I want to say it again and try and say it better. What really worries me, because I think it's about definition of what the arts are, and I notice you've got a capital A there, but the assumption is hierarchical about high arts, and everybody seems to be falling into it rather easily. And this question about when people leave school that they disengage, I'm sorry, they don't. They engage with other cultural forms like music and iPhones and graffiti, and they're all perfectly relevant, and they communicate to us and we use them. And surely publicly funded arts is about helping people to engage and give status to what they do, become better at it. So we learn as much from them about what is art as they learn from us, and this assumption of high and low.
Good. Let's have a quick blast from the shadow spokesman for culture.
Very quick, and I'm really sorry I've got to go to the constituency. It's absolutely crucial to kind of get people when they are young, and if I can, so much of what we believe is about who we are and what made us. And I remember it, I grew up in Bradford, and I got a job in television. My goodness, that didn't happen very often. But do you know what? When we got the National Media Museum in Bradford, it was almost like, oh my gosh, what on earth, why would they put this amazing museum in Bradford? And gosh, should we have thought that? Should we? And I think things have changed since I was growing up, 25 years ago. But they had a huge effect on me, and I guess that is an emblem of how important it is that we have access to cultural and institutions and museums when we are growing up. I'd just like to leave you in particular with one thought, and it's a kind of call to arms, a plea, perhaps in two of the three towns that I represent, we don't have a theatre, we don't have an art gallery. Do you know what? We don't even have a cinema. And I have kind of looked, and I know you're kind of a bit dismissive about opinion polls, Dom, but let me tell you why I'm telling you about this opinion poll, because I wanted to know about how happy people were in my constituency. And do you know what? They're not that poor. They're about average. But relative to neighbouring areas which are poorer, but which have more of these things, they are less happy. My constituency, people are really unhappy, and my hunch is that because there's nothing to do, and there are none of these wonderful things that we benefit from greatly in London. And I really want us to kind of provide that concrete evidence, because I think that is the biggest and strongest, most compelling for the public funding of arts, whether or not we are happy. There's more to life than just work and jobs. But so please, let's work together.
Don, you're accused of not making people happy, and we can't be having that. Do you want to... Thank you very much to Gloria and Piero for joining us. Counterblast from Don. Do bear the questions in mind, if you could.
I mean, Gloria says I was dismissive of opinion polls. I'm not dismissive of opinion polls. I was saying that we need opinion polls that look at other issues. And it's interesting, and Gloria, I hope you can hear as you're still going out, I do remember your party has been totally dismissive of the current government's attempt to find a way of addressing the issue of well-being and doing something about people's well-being, which is the point that I made, and I'm glad Gloria agrees with it. But if we can stick to the two questions, again, incredibly well linked, because I entirely accept the point that was made at the back, that we shouldn't just be concentrating on capital A art, high art, whatever you want to call it. It's all of those myriad of things that young people are involved in, undoubtedly will continue to be involved in, whether it's through the work they do on video games, etc., the music that they're listening to, hopefully downloading legally rather than illegally, and there's big issues there. But so I entirely accept that, and that's why the point I made earlier, I think, is critical. It is about the development of creativity in our schools. And, you know, you can dismiss, and I might join with you, but I'm not allowed to say it on this platform, some of your views about what's in the national curriculum. But what I'm also very conscious of is any subject can be used for the delivery of creativity. And let's remember it works both ways. I mean, everybody remembers Simon Rattle's research of about 8 to 9 years ago demonstrating the huge link between those who are involved in music and their ability in respect of maths. And that's true right across the board. Creativity can be delivered in science. My old subject of physics, seen by many people to be really dull and boring, actually it is really exciting. It can deliver creativity, it can deliver art, low art and high art as well. So I think there's lots of stuff we can do within the school's curriculum if we address the issue of creativity as being at the core of what this should all be about.
Alan, some people, I suspect, and particularly perhaps more outside this room than in it, might be rather uncomfortable with this equation of low and high art and graffiti with established high art forms. Does the Chief Executive of Arts Council England have a view on such a thing?
We don't have a concept of low and high art. Look, we're about funding the arts in their broadest definition, and we're funding the arts of whatever kind to be the best they can be. And yes, young people are taking on different art forms or expanding art forms in different ways. And there's quality and intrinsic authenticity there. And that's what we're interested in. We're interested in, I mean, we can debate excellence and what excellence means. I mean, for me, it's about the authenticity of the intention and the integrity of the execution. But going forwards, we need to look at, in the Arts Council, how we look at talent, for example. So getting young people who've got something, spotting them, giving them the opportunity to actually make something further of whatever it is that they're engaged with. And we know that we can't do that sitting, from where we are in our regional offices in the country. And we're going to have to engage with artists and with arts organisations to help us do that. And that's one of the things in our 10-year plan, but also for the next 4 years, we're interested in going forwards. And just to return to something that Gloria said, one of the things we're very clear about when we kind of look at our national portfolio is we're going to have regard to cold spots, parts of the country where for various reasons, there might not be arts provision. And, okay, we can't invent provision where there isn't any. But there's often places and spaces where things can happen. So how can we get things happening there that engage with people and that provide some more opportunities to the arts for places where there aren't at the moment? And it's going to be hard to do, and it's not something you can wave a magic wand. And you cannot go to a place and say there shall be art. I mean, it has to be built up and developed.
Just a small question to Alan, if I can. I mean, Alan, you and I have had this conversation on a number of occasions, and that is the role of the RFOs in filling some of that void. Yeah. And I know that the Arts Council are moving much more in the contracts with RFOs, requiring it. Some of them do fantastically good outreach work, but not enough of them do. And surely it ought to be absolutely a requirement that contracts with RFOs who receive funding through you are involved in outreach work and are filling in some of those, as you described them, cold spots.
Right, come on, we must crack on, because I really want some more questions. So I'd like Josie. Yeah, English back, no one seems to have bothered with very much. If anyone who has thoughts on English back, please do say. But
I wasn't going to talk towards the English back, sorry. I was just going to make a really brief point, which is the theatre that I run is actually engaged in a very old medium, which is playwriting, and it's about the single-authored play. And I think one of the things that I'm most relieved about in terms of a change in the way in which Arts Council, even at our officer level, talks about the work that we do, is maybe 3 years ago there was a sense that actually, not that the form was entirely defunct, but that we should be looking at different ways of working, that intrinsically there was something that wasn't forward-looking enough, not maybe high, but maybe a bit too old about the idea of the play. And I think that one of the things that is brilliant that I've seen is a sense that not only do playwrights innovate within their own form, and that within art forms they continually evolve, even if the form is old, even if the medium is old, sometimes the form is new. That also what I think is a much more confident generation of playwrights who are speaking with a much clearer voice, actually, and that might be about the big political shift that we've seen. If you imagine you're a playwright now in your early 20s, you might have been part of that generation that marched against the war and nothing happened. What kind of playwright does that make you? What kind of voice does that generate? What's your engagement with society, if that's your identity? And I think I'm very pleased to see that conversation has been parked.
Thank you very much. Yasmin.
The English baccalaureate question is a good one, but I think it relates to what I said earlier, that I sense, and I may be wrong, that there is a narrowing definition of what is needed in terms of education and a narrowing definition of what excellence is. And I think that also goes for the various people who make up this country. What is excellent in terms of arts production, I'm very worried, is kind of really narrowing to the classics and to Latin and to, those traditional areas. And that would just be plain wrong for this country. We are not only people who think excellence is tied to that Eurocentric tradition, which is very important. It is part of my tradition. But if it becomes, Mr. Boris Johnson and his Latin and all of that, I would worry very much.
Right.
Right, let's get 3 questions, and we're going to have to nip through them because I'm afraid they kick us out. So where shall I go? I think somewhere over here, perhaps the gentleman in the blue jumper first, if possible. If the microphone could be... Just keep your hand up, I think it's much easier for the ladies to find you. Anything on this side? Yes, I could take a gentleman with the spectacles on the end of his nose with his hand in the air. If you just keep your hand up till the microphone gets to you. And do we have sort of one more? Anyone absolutely desperate? And a gentleman here who he pointed out had his hand up for about an hour and a half. So just going in that order if we could. Please keep your questions very tight. Panel, same goes for you.
Patrick Sanford, Artistic Director of the Nuffield Theatre in Southampton. I just want to refer to what Don Foster said about local authorities not understanding the intrinsic and instrumental value, and followed by Gloria talking about a different region being happy because this provision was there. I want to acknowledge immediately the work that has been done in my city, in particular by Arts Council England South East, in nurturing a relationship with the local authority. The fact remains that I talk to my local councillors and they still don't understand it. I know this red book by heart because I've done my application with Kate Anderson, who's beside me. Most of my councillors don't even know what I'm talking about.
So what's the question?
The question is, please will the Arts Council and political parties of all dimensions say to the local authorities once and for all, the fact that there have to be cuts does not mean that this stuff is not actually crucial to the vibrancy of your community.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. And we had another question. Who's got the other microphone?
I've got it here.
Good.
My name's Srila Ghosh and I'm director of the Free Word Centre in London, which is a new centre bringing together literature, literacy and free expression. My question to the panel is, Ed Vasey, the minister, joked this morning about banning Enron. Do you think there are any limits to free expression, and where would you draw the line?
Very good question. Thank you. And can we just take this last gentleman and so we can nip round and get some answers? Yes, sir. I think you had a microphone for this gentleman with the pink shirt at the front, please. Well, let's start to get answers to the questions. I'll go to Alan first, because it was a rather specific Arts Council question.
The specific Arts Council question on local government, please, will we sort of say how important it is? Yes. Yes, and we're doing it. And we're having very deep conversation with many local authorities up and down the country. And we have a picture as to what's going on. With the best local authorities, it's an intense conversation about how we can keep the best going, how we can keep the things that are really important going over the next 4 years, because we want to look beyond the next 4 years. We want to look for the future in terms of provision and in terms of the people who live in particular localities. Having said that, it's really difficult. Local government has got so many challenges. So we're not going to be able to solve everything. We're not going to be able to sort everything out. But rest assured, those conversations are taking place. And with some of the new responsibilities that we're taking on interest in museums and libraries, going forwards, we're going to be able to have some single and very focused conversations, which I hope will pay dividends as we go forwards. But we've got some big challenges happening now.
I'm just going to have to bring you to a close if I could, just so we make sure we get everyone in. This gentleman, a very quick question.
Yeah, hello. My name is Al Normith. I'm director of Shisha, based in Manchester. I absolutely agree with what Yasmin was talking about in the context of excellence and Eurocentrism. One of the key issues, I think, is that we talk about communities. You know, there's hardly anybody from the diverse communities represented here. That shows you, this level of debate. We also need to radically think about how we're going to engage with communities in the context of museums. I think some of the museums need to be at the communities themselves, like, for example, New Art Exchange in Nottingham.
Can you just come to a really punchy question?
The punchy question really is that, in terms of cultural diversity, what is the Arts Council's support for?
Yasmin, would you like to take that one up?
Yes, very quickly. And it kind of goes back to what Josie was saying, and I completely worship the Bush and the work that's done there and what the passionate argument she made about public funding. But I also am getting a little bit more anxious that public funding in itself will not produce the kind of diversity we need. The Islamic Gallery at the V&A was not just the most extraordinary thing. It wouldn't have happened without a private benefactor. And that it happened has huge political implications for British Muslims living here who are disengaged with the idea of art, many of them, but also, what the V&A now stands for. So I'm beginning to think that some way of achieving the great change we want will have to come from proper partnerships between the private and the public, that simply publicly funded institutions often don't deliver and become very narrow-minded. So I know this is anathema. I believe in public funding, but some of the most exciting things I've seen in the last year have come from partnerships.
Don.
I mean, there's so much one can say on the issue of diversity, and if you want to know that we're not succeeding, just look at how many people from ethnic minority backgrounds are going to be represented at the BAFTA Awards on Sunday. But we were asked the question about limits of expression. I was talking to a couple of people in my office today in their sort of early 20s, and they were saying, what are the productions that have most inspired you that you've seen? And I happen to mention, as well as Enron, which you mentioned, which I think is absolutely fantastic play, was actually something from in the 60s, which was O Calcutta. And I don't know how many of you went to see it, but it certainly broke a lot of boundaries in its time.
It must have made a big impression on you.
But the point about it is, and why I just raised, I hope we will never have any of those limits to expression other than within the sort of legal framework of incitement to racial hatred and so on. It's that at the moment there is a real worry for me that we will start looking at the issue of the cuts in the budget. They're nowhere near as bad as many people feared they will be, although in local government there's a real concern. And we will assume that we're able to fill the gap with philanthropy, and of course I welcome the moves to get more philanthropy involved. But it is vital that we maintain a mixed funding stream, because philanthropists on the whole are not going to fund the risky, the innovative, the challenging, particularly challenging to those people who are in power. So for heaven's sake, what we have to do is keep pressing for that mixed funding pot.
Thank you very much for being so obliging. Josie, the last word goes to you, and we're in red time.
I think never in the course of panel discussion has O Calcutta and Enron been brought together.
Absolutely.
So that's a big moment. Local authorities. One of the most transforming things in the Bush's life over the past 18 months has been the idea that we've got this new home, and that's been through a partnership with our local authority that was from a standing start. We were nowhere and we got there. And actually the way that we got there was by getting a sophisticated sense of who the people were within that local authority. And that advice came to us from friends and partners. And I think that there is something that we can do to build strategies as arts organisations across local authorities. Which councillors are you talking to? Who's interested? How can we get them in? How can we be effective lobbying organisations? And how can Arts Council convene and support that? In terms of the representation of diverse communities on our stages, I'd also say, what about the representation in our offices, in our administrations, backstage? I think that's a massive change, and we don't talk about that enough. It's obviously a huge thing that we've not sorted out. The only thing that makes me feel positive about it is that when I started out as a theatre director, there were a handful of women I could have looked to doing that job, and there's now a serious constituency of them who in the course of 10 years have become confident, and they've become confident because they saw other women doing it, and it's approaching kind of critical mass. So I know that it's doable within gender, and I think it's important to reflect on that. Philanthropy, I disagree actually. I think you can always find a philanthropist to support something quixotic, risky, eccentric. One of the problems with philanthropy is that it is eccentric because it's limited generally to the interests of the individual. If we want real sectoral change, then we do need public funding.
That seems a very good place on which to leave it. And, well, I think we've shown this afternoon that the small matter of trending insolvency doesn't preclude a very interesting and wide-ranging debate. Thank you very much for asking your questions, which I thought were great. I'm very sorry to those who didn't get in. Of course, please do stay on for the next session. But most of all, thank you to our panel, to Yasmin, to Don, to Josie, Alan, and to Gloria in absentia. Thank you very much.
Well done, guys. Thank you.